Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. This is To The Point English. My name's Ben, and in this video you will learn 10 C1 and C2 level, so that's advanced and proficiency level, phrasal verbs. Now, if you're in a hurry, then go to the description and click on the timestamp, and that will take you directly to the first phrasal verb. And for the more patient of you, I'd just like to take a minute to explain something. And I'm going to use a famous quote, it's a proverb really, that some of you may know to illustrate my point. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Now that proverb is usually used when talking about charity, about how to help people in need, usually living in poverty. But it can also be used when referring to learning things, about education. Is it better to give people the answer directly, the answer to a problem, so give them the fish? Or is it better to teach them how to solve the problem themselves, teach them how to fish? In this video, I'm going to give you the fish because I'm going to teach you the phrasal verbs directly. In my previous two videos, I was trying to teach you how to fish, metaphorically of course, because those videos were about how to learn phrasal verbs. I wasn't just teaching phrasal verbs, although there are phrasal verbs in those videos. But no, I was focusing on how to use context and logic to learn and understand phrasal verbs. And for me, that's really necessary. You need to know how to learn phrasal verbs because it's impossible to learn all of them in videos like this with lists. But these videos are also useful, especially if you're studying for exams, which many of you are. So without any further ado, let's go to number one. Ramp up. So ramp up means to increase the level or amount of something quite significantly. And it's often used in collocation with efforts. So you often ramp up your efforts. Governments around the world must ramp up their efforts to combat global warming. So governments around the world must ramp up their efforts to combat global warming. So it's not just to increase a little, it's to significantly increase their efforts. Okay, number two, stem from. Now this means to originate from or to be caused by something. Now before we look at the example, I should explain the meaning of stem. The stem is the part of a plant, a small plant. It's like the base. In a tree it would be called a trunk, but on a smaller plant it's called a stem. So this kind of helps you understand the meaning of the phrasal verb. Something stems from, it originates, everything comes from there. So the branches and the leaves come from the stem. But let's look at the example. Many of the problems that young people face nowadays stem from excessive use of social media. Okay, so many of the problems that young people face nowadays stem from excessive use of social media. So many of the problems, not all the problems, but originate from social media use. Okay, number three now. Clamp down on. Clamp down on. So this is a three-part phrasal verb, and it basically means to suppress or to prevent something from happening. And it's quite hard to clamp down on something. It's quite emphatic and quite hard. And it's usually an authority that clamps down. So it could be the police, the government, the school, the headmaster. Let's look at the example. The headmaster of the school decided to clamp down on the use of smartphones in class. The headmaster of the school decided to clamp down on the use of smartphones in class. So he really decided to prevent it from happening, or to suppress it, to stop it from happening, basically. So as I said, it's quite hard. So it's suggesting that this headmaster has taken a decision that no more use of smartphones in class. Okay, let's move on to number four. To lay off. Lay off. A layoff means to make redundant from work. Now it's important that you understand what make redundant means here, of course. If somebody is made redundant or laid off, it means that they must leave their work through no fault of their own. So they have done nothing wrong. It just means that the company they work for is reducing the number of employees they have for whatever reason. So they're not being fired. If you are fired, it's because you've done something wrong. you've been always late, or you've stolen something, or you're just a bad worker. But if you're laid off or made redundant, it's just because of the situation of the company. So the example, due to the pandemic, the company had to lay off 50 employees. So due to the pandemic, the company had to lay off 50 employees. So those employees could no longer work at the company, their positions no longer existed. Okay, let's look at number 5. Before we look at number 5, I want to remind you, as I've said in previous videos, that I give my own examples to these phrasal verbs. I always give examples that I think will help so you can see them in context. But to really learn and remember any vocabulary, it's much better if you can think of your own examples that have some kind of emotional connection to you. So you can use examples with names of people you know, or situations that have happened to you, or you can imagine happening to you. My examples are fine, but they are my examples. Your examples will be much better for you. Anyway, number 5 is to iron out. Iron out. The pronunciation here is important. It's iron, not iron. The R is silent, so to iron out. And this means to resolve difficulties or problems. Now you can imagine, when you iron, to iron, the act of ironing, you're flattening clothes, a shirt or trousers or whatever. So you could think of these, the wrinkles, the creases in the clothes as the problems, and by ironing them out, you're flattening them, so there are no more problems, no more creases. But of course it's more metaphorical, it's not literal, so this example will help you to understand it. Boris and Angela don't have a good relationship, but they must iron out their differences in order to move forward. So those are just some random names that I thought of, but you get the idea. They have to iron out their differences. We often use iron out with differences. So when I talk about difficulties or problems, differences in this case, differences between people, differences of opinion are problems. So you have to iron out the differences to be able to move forward in this case. Okay, number 6, weigh in or weigh in on. So to weigh in on something is to give your opinion during a discussion or a debate. So Donald weighed in on the debate about who is better, Messi or Ronaldo. So Donald weighed in on the debate about who is better, Messi or Ronaldo. So Donald gave his opinion. Maybe there was a lot of people talking about this, and then Donald gave his opinion, so he weighed in on the debate. So I'm going to give you one more example here, because it's very useful if you want to give an opinion, to interrupt maybe, or to signal that you want to give your opinion. You can just say, can I weigh in here? Can I weigh in here? So you don't need to say weigh in on, because you weigh in on something. But here you're not saying on what. You're just saying, can I weigh in here? So it means, can I give my opinion? Can I contribute to the debate? Okay, number 7 now. This one may be a little bit more familiar to you because it's very common, but I wanted to include it in this list because it's extremely useful, because although we have some synonyms which I'm going to give you now, they're not exactly the same. It has a very specific meaning. I think you'll understand when I tell you. It's to get rid of. To get rid of. Now, to get rid of kind of means to remove, it kind of means to discard, it kind of means to eliminate. But it doesn't really mean exactly any of those. It means all of those and none of them at the same time. It's very unspecific in that you're not really expressing what you are doing. And again, with an example, hopefully you'll understand more. So we decided to get rid of all our books to make more space in the living room. We decided to get rid of all our books to make more space in the living room. So here, I'm not telling you exactly what we did with our books. Maybe we sold them, maybe we threw them away, maybe we gave them to friends. I'm not giving that information. It's very unspecific, very general. But it's a very common phrasal verb because we use it in many situations. To get rid of old clothes, to get rid of furniture. Even in the mafia gangster movies, they often use it to say to get rid of him. It means to kill him, basically. But in normal English, we don't use it in that way. But let's look at number 8 now. So this is another common one that perhaps it's difficult to understand out of context, but obviously I'll give an example for context. It's turn out, to turn out. Now this basically means to prove to be, which may be a little confusing, but I'll explain more in a moment, or to result. So the example is, I always thought Justin Bieber was American, but it turns out he's Canadian. I always thought Justin Bieber was American, but it turns out he's Canadian. So it's kind of surprising that it proves to be, that the reality proves to be something different to what I thought. We often use it in a slightly different context too, which has more of the meaning of to result. For example, despite the rain, the barbecue turned out well. So despite the rain, the barbecue turned out well. So that means the result of the barbecue was good. Everybody had a good time despite the rain, so the result was good. Again, it has that little bit of surprise in it that, you would think because of the rain it would be a disaster, but it turned out well. Okay, number 9 now. To come across. Come across. And this simply means to appear, but it's really referring to the personality, how somebody appears through their personality. William comes across as being very serious, but actually he's quite funny. So William comes across as being very serious, but actually he's quite funny. So he comes across as being serious, that is how he appears. Maybe he doesn't smile much, or he's always frowning, but the reality is different. So how he appears is not how he is. Okay, the last one now, number 10. Put up with. Put up with. Now this means to tolerate or accept something unpleasant, something you don't like. And again, this is quite a common phrasal verb that you may be familiar with, but I decided to include it in this list because it's very useful. It's very important because although we have alternatives, we don't usually use the alternatives. So you will hear this phrasal verb in many situations, in film, series, in just normal day-to-day English. So the example is, YouTube is great. The only problem is that we have to put up with all those annoying adverts. So YouTube is great. The only problem is that we have to put up with all those annoying adverts. So when you put up with something, it's something you don't like. It's annoying, it's something unpleasant, but you have no alternative, or it's just something you have to do. You have to put up with it. What I would really like you to do now, if possible, is to put some of your own examples in the comments. If you can all share your own examples, then you can really learn from the context, and it will help you remember. You see your own examples and other people. That would be a great way to really cement those phrasal verbs in your mind. So do that if you can. Hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you very soon for another one. Take care. Bye. So they must increase significantly. So they must increase significantly. So they must increase.